Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Channel Crime Story Diaries. Nicole Pitts was born on the 2nd of February 1973 in the city of Bellevue, King County, Washington State. Her parents divorced when Nicole was still a child. Raised alongside her sister by her mother, Gail Ann Schneider, who worked as a stewardess and often had to leave her daughters under the care of others. From a young age, Nicole suffered from a painful illness, endometriosis. To cope with chronic pain, the girl had to take strong prescription painkillers. Unfortunately, this later led to her developing a dependency on medication and alcohol, which particularly worsened during her teenage years. However, through perseverance and the support of loved ones, Nicole managed to overcome her dependencies. She underwent rehabilitation and became an active participant in the Alcoholics Anonymous movement. Having obtained an education, Nicole found employment as an administrator at a local fitness club. It was there that she crossed paths with her future husband, David Pietz, who held a sales position. Despite their differences in temperament and worldview, a romantic relationship blossomed between the young couple. David captured Nicole's heart with his charisma and sense of humor, and on the 20th of April 2002, the lovers tied the knot on the beach of the picturesque Hawaiian island of Maui. The young family settled in Seattle, where they both continued working. Nicole secured a position as a corporate trainer in one of the companies. Now, every morning, she commuted to the office, which was approximately a 20-minute journey. At work, Nicole quickly gained the favor and respect of her colleagues. Everyone noted her kindness, friendliness, and exceptional ability to connect with people. Co-workers enjoyed starting their workday with Nicole's genuine laughter, which seemed to illuminate everything around her. In the autumn of 2005, a significant event occurred in the lives of the Pitts family. They purchased their own home in the town of Lynnwood, Washington State. Nicole immediately fell in love with this cozy corner, especially considering its proximity to Seattle, the city of her dreams. Soon, the new residents of Lynnwood got acquainted with all the neighbors and made a great impression on them. The woman often strolled around with her dogs, happily stopping to chat with passers-by. The Pitts family gained a reputation for being friendly and amiable people. At the time of their move to Lynnwood, 32-year-old Nicole had already celebrated 8 years of sobriety, of which she was immensely proud. Despite her achievements, she had no intention of stopping there and continued attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings weekly. Now Nicole not only strengthened her own sobriety, but also willingly helped other struggling individuals stay on the chosen path. Her recovery story inspired and instilled hope in the hearts of those still battling daily with a morbid attraction to alcohol. Throughout all these years, Nicole's loving husband David stood by her side. At least that's how it seemed to those around them, as behind the doors of their family nest, an idyllic atmosphere did not always prevail. Despite the apparent harmony, the relationship between Nicole and David Pitts was far from always cloudless. According to the couple's friends, serious conflicts began to arise between them over time, which they preferred not to disclose to outsiders. The main source of contention was persistent financial difficulties. The family barely made ends meet, so money matters repeatedly became a cause of arguments. David pinned high hopes on a promised promotion at work, but each time someone else was appointed to the coveted position instead of him. Upon learning of her husband's latest setback, Nicole felt a sharp pang of disappointment but tried not to show it to David. Equally challenging was Nicole's lifestyle and her commitment to the Alcoholics Anonymous community. While sobriety was a conscious choice and a source of pride for the woman, David viewed it with extreme skepticism. In his opinion, all these meetings were a sham, and Nicole had transformed into an overly righteous and dull person. He did not hesitate to enjoy himself with friends at bars, and often returned home inebriated. This led to arguments with his wife, accusing her of excessive frugality and unwillingness to have fun as they once did. However, the most painful blow for Nicole was David's infidelity. It turned out that throughout their marriage, he had engaged in affairs with at least 4 women. Dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of their relationship, he attempted to persuade her into engaging in threesomes. Nicole's friends and colleagues only occasionally witnessed her marital troubles. The woman disliked airing their dirty laundry and only confided in her closest friends about David. In her husband's presence, Nicole always smiled and pretended that everything was fine between them. Few suspected how truly unhappy she felt in her marriage. Saturday, January 28, 2006, was supposed to be a completely ordinary day for Nicole Pitts. In the morning, the woman was preparing to attend the regular meetings of anonymous alcoholics in the city of Renton, located several dozen kilometers from Lynnwood. Such trips had long become an integral part of her life and were planned at least several weeks in advance. However, this time something went awry. Nicole, who never missed AA meetings without a serious reason, did not show up at the gathering. Her absence greatly disturbed her friends from the anonymous alcoholics, who were the first to sound the alarm. Waiting until evening and not receiving any news from Nicole, they contacted David Pietz. The man was in complete bewilderment. He had no idea where his wife had disappeared to. The next day, January 29th, David officially reported Nicole's disappearance to the police. According to him, the last time he saw his wife was at midnight from the 27th to the 28th of January when he returned home from work. The woman was already asleep in their bed, and the man did not want to wake her up. David was certain that in the morning, Nicole would go to the AA meeting as planned. However, due to his chronic busyness, or perhaps indifference, he did not know for sure the route of her journey. Waking up in the morning, David did not find his wife at home. Throughout the day, he tried to call Nicole several times, but she did not answer. At first, the man did not attach much importance to this, as Nicole sometimes drifted away from reality, immersing herself completely in the affairs of her AA wards. David thought that his wife might be upset with him because the night before he went to bed without talking to her. But when there was still no news from Nicole late into the evening, David became worried. He called several of her friends, but no one knew where the woman could be. Then Pitts decided to wait a little longer, hoping that his wife would return soon or at least call. However, in vain. Nicole seemed to have vanished into thin air. When the next day David finally went to the police station to report his wife's disappearance, the law enforcement officers were very skeptical of his words. Usually they did not initiate searches for adults until at least several days after their disappearance. However, David's persistence and the numerous calls from Nicole's concerned friends prompted the cops to start an investigation. First and foremost, the police visited the Pitts residence to thoroughly search it. There they made the first discovery. Along with Nicole, her car, a 2003 Volkswagen Jetta, had disappeared. Now the investigators had no doubts that on the morning of January 28th, the woman did leave home in the direction of Renton. But at some point, she disappeared along the way. Upon receiving this news, Nicole's relatives immediately sprang into action. Her parents, Gail and Rod Schneider, who lived in Arizona, immediately bought plane tickets and arrived in Washington. The disappearance of Nicole Pitts shook the entire community of the town of Lynnwood. Not only professional law enforcement officers, but also ordinary citizens who sincerely sympathized with the missing woman joined in the search. Primarily, investigators tried to find Nicole's car, as it could be the key to unraveling what happened to its owner. The woman's family and friends began posting flyers on the streets of the town with a description and a photo of the missing Volkswagen Jetta. They implored anyone with even the slightest piece of information to report it to the police. To encourage people to cooperate, Nicole's parents even announced a monetary reward for valuable information that would help find their daughter. Simultaneously, law enforcement officers searched for the missing car on their own. They meticulously searched all possible places where Nicole could have left the car, but in vain. The Volkswagen Jetta seemed to have vanished into thin air. Investigators began to lean towards the idea that someone deliberately stole or hid the car to confuse the trail of the crime. On the 9th day of the search, what everyone feared finally happened. In the morning of February 7th, 2006, passers-by stumbled upon the body of a naked woman lying in the tall grass in a wooded area near Renton Airport. When the police arrived at the scene, they quickly identified the deceased. She was 33-year-old Nicole Pitts, who had been missing for over a week and was being sought by her family and friends. Even to the naked eye, it was evident that Nicole's death was the result of violence. Her body bore numerous bruises and contusions, apparently inflicted with a blunt object. But what struck the police the most was the victim's neck. It showed clear signs of strangulation. A superficial examination of the body immediately led investigators to consider the possibility of sexual assault, as Nicole was completely naked. However, a more thorough examination and subsequent forensic analysis refuted this theory. No traces of sexual violence were found on the victim's body. Instead, pathologists concluded that Nicole Pitts died from asphyxiation due to neck compression. In other words, she was simply strangled with bare hands. During the autopsy, experts noticed several other peculiar details. The soles of the victim's feet were remarkably clean for someone walking in the woods. It seemed as if Nicole did not walk there herself, but was brought or driven there by someone else. Additionally, a cap was found in the victim's mouth, which she usually only wore at night. All this indicated that Nicole was killed elsewhere, and her body was simply dumped in the wooded area. Nicole's burial took place on February 12th and gathered hundreds of people. In addition to close relatives and friends, almost all the residents of Lynnwood, who had come to love Nicole for her kind heart and cheerful disposition, came to bid her farewell. People wept, recalling how bright and sincere Nicole was, and cursed the inhumanity that took her life. Following the discovery of Nicole Pitts' body, law enforcement officials in King County initiated an extensive investigation into her murder. The primary task of the investigators was to establish the final hours of the woman's life and trace her movements on January 28, 2006. It was revealed that on that morning, Nicole left Lynnwood heading towards Renton, which is part of King County, but she never reached her destination. Examining the victim's bank statements, the police discovered that her credit card was last used on January 30th in the city of Kent. This information allowed the investigators to focus their search for potential witnesses and evidence in that region. By meticulously studying surveillance camera footage at gas stations and stores nearby, detectives hoped to uncover a clue that could lead them to the killer who might have used Nicole's card to mislead the police. Simultaneously, law enforcement continued their search for Nicole's car. Finally, on February 21st, it was located. 2003 Volkswagen Jetta was found in one of the parking lots near the campus of Washington University. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the car's interior, hoping to find evidence of the perpetrator. Initially, there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary inside, just ordinary items. However, experienced experts immediately noticed several peculiar details. Firstly, there were no personal belongings of Nicole inside the car. Neither her mobile phone nor her wallet with documents and credit cards. Secondly, the driver's seat was pushed back much further than she typically did herself. This suggested that someone significantly taller had been behind the wheel. More questions arose for the investigators after a thorough examination of the car's interior. Forensic analysts discovered traces of hair and fingerprints on the seat, gear shift, and other surfaces that did not belong to Nicole. However, cross-referencing with databases yielded no matches. These biological materials did not belong to any known criminals who were on the police's radar. Interviews with residents of surrounding buildings also failed to provide clarity. None of the witnesses could recall when exactly Nicole's car was parked in the lot and who might have driven it there. Upon receiving the results of the car's forensic examination, investigators were faced with a new mystery. All DNA samples found in the car's interior belonged either to Nicole herself or her husband David. No external traces were found in the vehicle. It would have been challenging for a random criminal to meticulously wipe all surfaces clean without leaving behind even a trace of genetic material. This led to the suspicion that someone from Nicole's inner circle might be involved in her disappearance and murder. At this stage, Nicole's parents, Gail and Rod Schneider, decided to offer a monetary reward for information that would help find and bring their daughter's killer to justice. Despite initial setbacks, the investigators were determined not to give up. Detectives from the Homicide Investigation Unit of the King County Sheriff's Department continued actively gathering information. However, over time, the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. Unfortunately, reviewing surveillance camera footage and interviewing witnesses who might have seen Nicole in the final hours of her life did not yield the desired results. Law enforcement officials were unable to trace the woman's path from her home in Lynnwood to the location where her body was found near Renton on the day of her disappearance. Nevertheless, investigators did manage to uncover some details. They established that on the eve of her death, Nicole had attended a party at a bar in Renton with friends. The bar staff confirmed that the woman was seen there around 11 p.m. According to waiters and other patrons, Nicole only consumed non-alcoholic beverages and behaved as friendly and amiable as usual. Around midnight, the group she was with settled their bill and left the bar. This was the last reliable information about where the woman was seen alive. Her trail went cold after that. A surprising revelation for the investigators was the analysis of Nicole's private life details. During the investigation, it emerged that beneath the facade of a seemingly respectable couple, the Pitts were actually experiencing a deep crisis and mutual resentments. Family acquaintances revealed that David had been unfaithful to his wife for a long time, causing her great distress. Additionally, conflicts between the Pitts arose sporadically due to financial problems and differences in life priorities. This prompted law enforcement to scrutinize David Pitt more closely. Suspicions regarding him had arisen early in the investigation, as often the perpetrators turn out to be close relatives. Furthermore, David's behavior after his wife's disappearance seemed peculiar and insincere. Despite feigning concern, he was reluctant to cooperate with the police, refused to take a lie detector test, and secretly attempted to return to normal life sooner. The more investigators delved into the personal life of the Pitts couple, the more prominent David's figure became as the main suspect in Nicole's murder. Despite the lack of direct evidence linking him to the crime, circumstantial evidence repeatedly pointed to the fact that the man was withholding a lot or blatantly deceiving the police. Primarily, detectives were intrigued by a series of inconsistencies in David's statements regarding the events of January 28, 2006. Initially, he insisted that he last saw his wife late in the evening on the 27th, when she was already asleep. However, the results of Nicole's autopsy indicated that the woman had died at least a day later. This was evidenced by the condition of her internal organs and the contents of her stomach, undigested remains of Mexican food she had consumed at Renton's bar after midnight on the 28th. Furthermore, investigators discovered that David deliberately misled the police and close ones regarding Nicole's appearance at the time of her disappearance. He inexplicably omitted that the woman was wearing a delicate gold bracelet on her wrist, a gift from him on their wedding anniversary. Nicole's body was found without this adornment, and initially, detectives hoped to trace the bracelet, as it could have been a crucial lead. However, when they began questioning the victim's relatives and friends about it, they unanimously stated that David had taken the bracelet before going to the police. He did so hastily and nervously, arousing entirely justified suspicion in Nicole's mother. This fact provided investigators with food for thought. Assuming that David was indeed involved in his wife's murder, he could have taken her bracelet to confuse the investigation. Perhaps he wanted to make it appear as if Nicole had been robbed and killed by random criminals. Then the absence of the bracelet on the victim's wrist could easily be explained by a simple robbery. Gradually, law enforcement gathered enough evidence to formally accuse David of intentionally murdering his wife, yet they still lacked a solid alibi. Investigators hoped to establish Pitt's involvement in the crime through the testimonies of other witnesses and data from mobile operators. Therefore, in the following weeks, detectives focused on studying the nuances of David's personal life, his habits, interests, social circle, as well as financial transactions and movements before and after Nicole's murder. Just a few months after the commencement of the investigation into Nicole Pitts' murder, there was no doubt in the minds of the King County Police regarding the identity of the prime suspect. All the evidence collected by the investigators repeatedly pointed to none other than her own husband, David, being involved in her death, However, proving his guilt in court could only be achieved through irrefutable facts, so detectives continued to tirelessly work to gather as much material evidence as possible. The first significant breakthrough came with the results of the examination of David and Nicole's mobile phones. Through collaboration with telecommunication operators, investigators obtained detailed call logs of incoming and outgoing calls from both numbers in the days leading up to and following the woman's disappearance. Thorough scrutiny of the phone bills of the suspect and the victim provided investigators with additional arguments. It was revealed that on January 28, 29, David made multiple calls to individuals he usually disregarded: his lover, ex-girlfriend, and several women with whom he had infrequent contact in the past. Nicole's phone also remained active after her disappearance, receiving calls and messages from contacts on her list. It appeared as though David deliberately used his wife's number to obfuscate the investigation. Ultimately, the most compelling evidence, according to the investigators, was a single call received from Nicole's phone on January 28th at 9:37 p.m. The individual using the woman's mobile was located just a few miles away from the gas station where David had used his credit card that evening. Despite the crucial information provided by mobile operators, it was still insufficient to prove David Pitt's guilt in court. During a subsequent search of the Pitts residence, forensic experts finally uncovered what David had desperately tried to conceal. Among his personal belongings in the closet, they found a men's jacket with the collar and cuffs heavily stained with dried blood. The stains had been attempted to be removed, but traces could not be entirely eradicated. The discovery was sent for analysis, and soon the results arrived. The blood on David Pitt's jacket turned out to be of the third blood group, with a positive Rh factor. This was the same blood type as his deceased wife, Nicole. Following the discovery of blood traces on David Pitt's coat that matched the blood group of his deceased wife, the King County Police finally gathered sufficient evidence to arrest the suspect. On March 21, 2012, more than 6 years after the crime was committed, David was apprehended at his workplace and taken into custody. At that time, the 38-year-old man had long left Lynnwood, moved to another city, and found a new job. Several years after Nicole's death, David had managed to establish serious relationships with another woman and even became a father. During the initial interrogation, David Pitts vehemently denied his involvement in Nicole's murder. He insisted that he genuinely loved his wife and would never harm her. However, under the pressure of new evidence, the suspect began to contradict himself in his statements. He changed his testimony several times, confused his words, and eventually became uncooperative with the investigation. Despite efforts by the defense to challenge the arrest and secure David Pitt's release on bail, the court ruled to remand him in custody without the possibility of bail. The judge justified this decision by the unprecedentedly cruel and audacious nature of the crime, as well as the substantial evidence against the suspect. Over the next few months, David's attorneys delayed the transfer of the case to trial. The defense team inundated the investigation with numerous motions, demanding additional expert examinations and the inclusion of new witness testimonies in the case. Meanwhile, David continued to assert his complete innocence and even publicly insulted the family of his deceased wife, accusing her parents of slander. Ultimately, all attempts by David Pitt's defense to avoid trial proved futile. On September 4, 2013, nearly 7 years after Nicole's murder, the open court proceedings against her husband commenced. David was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide, a crime punishable by life imprisonment in the state of Washington. The trial of David Pitts lasted almost a month. Over 20 sessions, the jury heard testimony from dozens of witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. Each day, the courtroom was filled with journalists and concerned citizens, all eager to witness the accused in the crime. Relatives and friends of the deceased, police officers, and forensic experts involved in the investigation testified under the public's watchful eye. The defense arguments presented by David Pitts appeared unconvincing against the backdrop of numerous pieces of evidence provided by the prosecution. Throughout the process, the defendant's lawyers emphasized that all presented facts were circumstantial and could not definitively prove his guilt. The defense asserted that the DNA analysis had confused David's DNA traces with the biological material of the real killer, and the testimonies of witnesses who allegedly saw the defendant near the crime scene were blatantly fabricated by the investigation. However, these arguments proved too weak and failed to sway the court. Finally, on September 30th, 2013, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Unanimously, the 12 jurors found David Pietz guilty of the deliberate murder of his wife, Nicole. Upon hearing the verdict, the defendant sat motionless on the bench, staring at the floor. Less than a month later, on October 23rd, Judge Michael Hayden read out the final sentence for David Pietz. Considering the heinous and audacious nature of the crime, the court sentenced him to the maximum term of punishment, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Following the pronouncement of David Pitt's sentence, he was escorted out of the courtroom and taken to the maximum security Monroe prison, where he was to spend the remainder of his days. Nicole Pitts' murder shook the small community of Lynnwood and forever changed the lives of those who knew and loved this extraordinary woman. The story of her short but vibrant life serves as a cautionary tale for anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation. Nicole cherished life, rejoiced in each new day, and sought to share her warmth with those around her. She endured a difficult battle with her own demons and emerged victorious. No one expected the ending of her story to be so tragic. However, even in her death, Nicole managed to positively impact someone else's life. Her legacy is not just pain and emptiness, but also a beacon of hope for those teetering on the edge. After Nicole's passing, her family established a charitable foundation to aid victims of domestic violence. Annually, this organization saves dozens of women suffering from abusers, helping them start anew. Many years have passed since Nicole Pitts' life was cut short, yet her memory remains alive. Every year on her birthday anniversary, Nicole's loved ones and friends gather at the Renton Cemetery where she rests. Memories of Nicole warm the hearts of those close to her. And though Nicole's killer, David Pitts, is convicted and will bear his punishment until the end of his days, her story will forever serve as a reminder of life's fragility and the capacity of a person for both horrific cruelty and incredible love and self-sacrifice. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. It's always interesting and sometimes even creepy.